Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Safe Passage Project Interpreter Conversation series. Today, I am joined by the amazing Casey Benjamin, and we're just so grateful for her to be joining us in this conversation. This series is really about getting connected with interpreters and learning about their journeys. So we're really interested to learn more about you, Casey. And with that being said, I would love to pivot to you. So please give us an introduction, tell us about yourself and a little bit about your journey to Safe Passage Project.
Sure. Well, first of all, Tatiana, thank you so much for having me. I am a super fan of Safe Passage, and I've had an incredible time volunteering over the past, I guess it's been about a year and a half maybe that I've been involved. My journey to Safe Passage, let's see. I started in 2020, I would say, getting really interested in border work. And at the time, I had two high school aged kids. And it was the typical kind of February break and during the school year. And many people were getting ready to take big vacations with their families. And I was trying to figure out something to do with my kids that would be more meaningful and different. And I decided to take them down to the border to Brownsville. And we spent about a week volunteering at the border and specifically working with World Central Kitchen and preparing food with them. We would prepare food during the day, then we would walk the food across the border into Matamoros and actually serve the food to the migrants that were living there in the tent city. My kids at the time were, I guess, 16 and 15, I guess, something like that. And we had a really life-changing family experience. This was not sort of the typical vacation by the pool somewhere. We really went and did some activism. And I decided from that point on that I wanted to spend my own free time that way and also introduce my kids whenever possible to experiences like that. So I really, that was 2020, Matamoros. And then I came back and then COVID hit. And I basically went online and tried to find any opportunity that I had that I could do remotely while sitting at home, helping out these migrants that were stuck at the border.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And just also hearing that you're getting your kids involved and actively engaged. We know that youth voices are really powerful, especially in this particular climate. So thank you so much for exposing them to that space.
Yeah.
Now, one thing is oftentimes in our conversations, we talk so much about the work that you're doing with Safe Passage and also just volunteering, but I don't get to know a little bit more about your day to day. So what is your day job?
Yeah.
What do you do from your 9 to 5?
Yes, I'm actually a jewelry designer. So I run a business from my home. I design jewelry and I sell it online and I sell it in stores. So I have I have a lot of freedom in my schedule. It's my schedule. I'm the boss. So I'm able to pick up, for example, an interpretation session with you guys in the middle of the day for 2 hours and put everything on silent and just go for it. So I've had my business for about 7 years. Prior to that, I worked in the nonprofit world. I used to work at an organization here in New York City that works in struggling inner city schools called Public Color. That's a fabulous organization. After that, I worked for a little while doing copywriting and brand directing for a startup. That was really cool. And started my own business after I had a little bout with cancer, actually twice. And after my second cancer, I decided to start this business of sort of meaningful jewelry. So my business is called Juju Supply, Juju, and you guys can all check it out. But I sell charms, I design charms that kind of have meaning, and you wear things to sort of tell your own little personal stories. So it's things like this. I know I'm digressing, but you asked, so you're getting all the details. I design little charms like this, and you wear them on chains, and they're sort of designed to, help you feel things, connect with who you want to be, who you are, what you've been through, things like that. So I do that for my job. But I spend all the rest of my time trying to help out this as an advocate for people at the border. So I guess what I would say is, I took this trip with the kids in 2020. And after that, I discovered another organization online called Al Otro Lado, which is an organization based in Tijuana that was working to get people across the board legally, when that was a possibility, to get them humanitarian parole. This work no longer exists for me, but that was sort of my first taste. Before I found Safe Passage, I actually started working with them. Did that for about a year, and that involved doing applications for migrants that were stuck on the Mexican side. and I was working alongside the lawyers at this organization. So I speak Spanish, studied Spanish in college. Always thought that I would end up using my Spanish I'm not a native speaker. I'm just somebody who likes to speak it and practice it. And I always thought that I would do something with my work that involved Spanish, but I kind of ended up going a different route. But living in New York City, I get the chance to use my Spanish a lot, which is great. And I was looking for ways to use my Spanish more and obviously work with people that are, struggling to get to this country, asylum seekers.
Yeah. I'm really grateful that you were able to just share your experience just throughout your trajectory. And I'm a bit nosy. Is this a charm on your neck from your business? I'm like, please share. Well, I see plenty. So are they all?
These down here, these are all my charms. This is actually not my charm. This is somebody else's, but this was a gift that was given to me by my mom, and I wear it every day. So, but everything else I'm wearing is mine. So.
I love it. I love it. And so one more time for everyone that's tuning in and listening, what is the name of your business? I love
it. So sweet. Okay. The name of my business is Juju Supply. So it's Juju Supply, just the way supply sounds. And you can find me on Instagram. You can find me online. I'm happy to give anybody who wants to buy something a discount. If you're a volunteer with Safe Passage, shoot me a message, DM me on Instagram. I'm happy to hook you up with a discount.
There you have it, folks. We are going to get discounts.
You didn't know you were going to be shopping on this.
Well, we had to check in. I absolutely love it. And I'm actually interested in looking in as well. So we'll connect offline a bit.
Yeah.
So again, a lot of your experience, you've talked about many impactful moments and things that really led you to wanting to work with people that are experiencing deportation or just young people that are faced by trauma as well. Yeah. So just based off of these experiences, what were like maybe some of the most impactful moments that you've experienced in volunteering with us? And share. I'm sure there's a lot. You've been with us for some time.
Really hard. I mean, do you want specific to Safe Passage or do you want just specific to Safe Passage?
Yes, that would be nice. And of course, if you can share more of your experience outside of that as well, but specifically with Safe Passage.
Sure. So the work that I've done primarily with you guys is a lot of the intake forms. So you guys are considering whether or not you're going to take on a case. So I get paired with a lawyer and I function as a translator between the youth and the lawyer. And what I would say first about that is two things. I know this is not exactly the answer to your question, but the kid is really nervous and the lawyer is really nervous. That is for sure. And I have found that my role a lot of the times has been to kind of put both parties at ease. And I'm very comfortable there. I feel like the lawyers are coming in, they don't speak the language. Some of them are students that haven't had a lot of real life experience yet. Some of them are adults, but it's their first time doing one of these. So a lot of times I find that a little bit of chit chat in the beginning with the lawyers and telling them that I've done this before, that I speak Spanish fluently, don't worry, has really put them at ease. And then for sure, the kids are nervous. I mean, it's an unbelievably scary experience, I would say, for the kids. A lot of them feel like they're getting into trouble. They don't basically, a lot of them are nervous to divulge certain information. They don't realize this is a safe space. So I always, and this is going to lead to your question, which is a certain case or person. I always try really hard to put the kid at ease first. And I've had really young kids and I've had kids that look older than me, but they're not, they come in all shapes and sizes. You never really know what you're going to get. But there's one particular boy who is from Guatemala, and he came to the United States by himself. I think at the time he was maybe 16. And, he walked here. He didn't take planes and get off at JFK. He walked to the United States. And so I just got
chills. It's chills. Yeah.
And so he walked here to join his two brothers that were already here in New York City. And that right there is an incredible feat. This particular kid looks a lot younger than the 19 that he is now. He looks like a very young kid. And I think some of that could be due to the way he was raised and malnutrition and his living environment that he was, left. His particular story, when you're doing the intakes, you have to get to the uncomfortable bits. I mean, because the intention here is obviously to make a case for this kid to be granted the special immigrant juvenile status and be able to stay here. So a lot of times as the interpreter, you are, the lawyer is, reading from a script and saying, okay, please tell us why you, don't want to speak to your father anymore. And then it's your job as the interpreter to really ask this very difficult question and then receive what is oftentimes a very difficult response. This particular boy, starting at a very young age, was not allowed to go to school. He had to work on a farm. He had to use very heavy machinery. He didn't have shoes. He was working barefoot. He had hose go through his foot. He stepped on large spinas, thorns. He had burns, lacerations, all kinds. Oh my God, my skin is like literally my skin running cold. He was working like a grown man at a very young age. And this family was incredibly impoverished, and he then worked the farm, and then he had to go to the market, and he had to be barefoot, and he had to sell the beans and the corn. So this particular boy, this is a case that you guys ended up picking up. I guess one thing I would also add is just because you do an intake form doesn't mean that that case is getting picked up. And that has been hard because a lot of times I don't know if a case gets picked up and I lose the thread with some of these young people that I've connected with. But this particular case, I did the intake. He ended up getting picked up by your amazing organization, and he was granted special immigrant juvenile status. And he and I have become friends, and he's here in New York, and I'm actually going to give him driving lessons next week.
I love that. So don't make me cry. Not on
I know.
camera.
Yeah, I mean, I took him to juniors. We had cheesecake.
I love that.
Very involved in his life, and I've stayed very involved in his life because I think what happens is, these kids come to this country and they don't know how things work. They don't know that you can get an ID card at the New York Public Library. A kid that I really connected with in a case that's really meaningful to me. This boy, young man, is somebody I intend to stay in touch with for the long haul. Make sure he's learning English. I found him English classes. And again, this is not necessarily the job description of an interpreter at Safe Passage, but when these kids need an advocate. And obviously you guys are doing the legal piece of it, which is incredible. But they really are desperate for a friendly face, someone who can, I think when I went to get FedEx, I got cut off, but he didn't know you could go to the New York you could get a New York State ID. And that's to have an ID as a kid, as an immigrant in the city is incredibly important. With an ID, you can open a bank account. You can do all kinds of things. So I've just become a little bit of like a fairy godmother or an aunt or something to this kid.
Yeah. You shared just a lot of powerful moments and really like inspiring moments that our interpreters, even I myself, was not fully aware of. And I'm super grateful just for like the space that you're giving to our young people, just to know that they have agency in this new environment, in this new journey themselves. And you doing that just speaks volumes to the work as an interpreter in the humanitarian space and just in the nonprofit space as well. So I just want to say thank you. I just want to take
that's really nice of you. Thanks. Thank you.
It's so inspiring. And just the impactful moments in itself, we think about just the work and we think about persons that are interested in doing this work, but don't fully have a general understanding of like what that looks like. And I'm wondering, just in your experience, if there's any advice that you would provide to someone that's interested in working and volunteering with us or volunteering with a young person who has been impacted by trauma. And we'll talk about self-care as well a little bit later in the conversation, because you mentioned a lot of things that I think really should be grounding in, like, how do you take care of yourself as well? But yeah.
I guess the first thing that I would say is that, to volunteer with you guys does not mean that you have to, there's no obligation to form a relationship with the young person outside of the volunteer work. Being a volunteer and being a friendly face and a warm face during a intake session with a lawyer is enough. And it's, so what I would say is smiling, being friendly, being kind, interjecting a little bit of humor, making it like I said, these young people have, many of them have spent time in detention. Many of the, and they are incredibly afraid of anybody in a position of authority, rightly so. A
Mhm.
lot of them have tried to cross the border and have been thrown back across the border. They've been picked up by police. They've been thrown in the back of cars. They've spent nights in not only detention, but those horrible places where they're covered with those tinfoil blankets. These kids have had a lot of trauma getting to the place that they are. So just being warm and kind and friendly. And I always like to use a little bit of humor with the kids, and also not just jumping right into the session. I feel like a lot of times the lawyers are very lawyerly, maybe for lack of a better way of saying it. And they're kind of like, okay, question one. And so I
Yeah,
always,
let's get to the work.
yeah, and I always try to pause and, introduce myself, make sure the lawyers introduce themselves, maybe make a comment about, oh, I like your t-shirt, anything that's just sort of not, the lead, because we're about to get into some very difficult, uncomfortable things to talk about. So I would just be sure to break the ice, old school breaking the ice before you jump in. And let's see, what else would I say about the experience? Was that the question? Like, what's the experience? Advice for someone
Yeah,
who's interested?
advice for someone who's interested in volunteering and just, yep. And I
Yeah,
think you're alluding to a lot of those things as well.
yeah. So I think I've touched on a lot of it. Yeah, the lawyers definitely, you need to be the friend. I mean, the lawyers are great. My gosh, I mean, the lawyers are so fantastic for volunteering their time. But like I said, they can be, pretty methodical. And so I think your job is to kind of be the warm fuzzy a little bit in the scene.
Mhm. Yes, and I absolutely love that. It's just bringing your personal touch, and that's oftentimes sometimes we need that just to be reminded, like, we're human. Although we went through this particular trauma and we need the support, we're still human, and that's really helpful to have that engagement there. Now, you talked a bit about just the intake process, and I'll just quickly name for those that are like, what is the difference? So here at Safe Passage, we do have an intake process and then also working on a case. And I believe, Casey, you've had the opportunity to do both of those aspects where you're doing the intake, which is the preliminary stages, and then you're working on a full term case. Now, in reference to working on a case, I know that you alluded to some of the tips that were really beneficial for you in the intake process. What about particularly on a case? If there's any tips for someone that's currently working on a case, and may need support when really navigating those conversations with both the lawyer and also the young person who has experienced trauma. What are some things that you could potentially give to them or offer to them in this current space?
Sure. First thing is, if you don't have WhatsApp, you have to get on WhatsApp, because all your communication is going to happen there. So that's really important. And it's really important that lawyers are on WhatsApp. And I would suggest, creating a group text, as soon as you're on the case, so that all communication can live there. The thing that you're going to discover is that a lot of times things that you think everybody knows how to do, the clients don't know how to do. So going to a notary, mailing something, getting a stamp, going to the post office. A lot of times lawyers need things sent to them. They need things signed. So you as a translator, that's where you can step in and be helpful. And if you know where they live, you can send them a link to where a notary is. You can explain what a notary is. They need to make photocopies of things, just helping them kind of with these very things that seem very rote to you and I are difficult for these guys. So that's sort of something that I have found is just like the clerical bit can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, the lawyer usually is trying to find a time to meet. There's a lot of going back and forth with everyone. Like, does this time work? Does this time work? And it's logistics, and so you're helping to coordinate, times for meetings, and then setting up. Oh, and the other thing that can be challenging is, are we Zooming? Are we on FaceTime? Are we WhatsApp videoing? So the more kind of clear you can be from the get-go and sort of definition of terms, like, okay, we're going to have a bunch of meetings. Do you guys want to work on FaceTime, WhatsApp, or Zoom? What's the most comfortable, or Google Meet, whatever. But these are the things that can like take a long time as you try to get going. So maybe just kind of clearing that up in the beginning around what the best way to communicate is. Trying to think what else I've experienced. A lot of times the clients are living in very crowded spaces or living in homes with a lot of people. There isn't a lot of private space. So maybe I would also, I have communicated the importance of maybe your uncle can take the baby to the other room while we're talking, because it is nice to be in a quiet, confidential space. Quiet maybe more than anything, because it's sometimes when you've got the lawyer and you've got the client and the translator, it's hard to coordinate all that. So asking them to kind of go into a quiet space and handle the rest of the household is usually a good thing too. And trying to think. I had an interesting thing that came up recently, which is that a family was, the client needed to come into the safe passage office.
Yeah.
I think and they did not want to take the train into Manhattan. And they also said they didn't have money for an Uber. So we had to kind of figure that one out, and they kind of blew off a meeting. There's a lot of sort of like, oh, I forgot the meeting was happening. So I think the other role of the interpreter is probably, because I'm imagining the lawyers have a lot of other things going on. So it's nice as the interpreter to be like, don't forget, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, we're all getting on a Zoom. Yeah. And if they have to be somewhere, maybe asking them how they're planning on getting there. Do they have transportation? Do they need a stipend? I'm imagining Safe Passage could help if they need help with transportation. Getting to a court appointment obviously would be critically important that they don't miss, but coming into an office. Other things that we've talked about is like what to wear when you're going into court. So we've had that conversation around clothing and sort of, boys not wearing their baseball caps and things like that. So I'm jumping around, but maybe I'm touching on what you need.
Every single point. Every single point. I'm here taking notes as well. I'm like, okay, this is really helpful, yeah, especially for my own processing. And I'm in awe. Thank you. I don't know how much gratitude I can share in these moments, but I am so grateful.
And I can keep talking off the camera, and I can tell you all kinds of things.
Of course, and I would love that. So a lot of the main points that I'm hearing is like emotional awareness, a lot of communicating amongst the young person and also the lawyers and our staff, and coming and showing up and as your full authentic self as well. I think in a lot of ways you've done that, and that has been really supportive to the process for the young person. So I hope that this resonates with a lot of people that are tuning in and listening to this. And Casey, amazing. I am just so grateful.
Well, I guess you just made me think of something, which is that these are kids.
Yeah.
I work with other organizations that I'm working with the adults, and that comes with a different set of challenges and things to deal with. But these are kids, and a lot of them don't have a mother or father in this country, and a lot of them aren't speaking to their mother or father, and they've come here to live with an aunt, or like the kid that I was telling you about, they come to live with an older brother. So they're really missing that sort of parental piece. So when I touched on sort of the clothing and not wearing a hat and the notary, whatever, these are things that, they don't have a grown-up in their lives, a lot of them. So I would say that I have felt myself stepping into that role from time to time, of just sort of being like a parent or a grown-up, and just sort of saying some things that maybe seem super obvious. But if you're new to this country and you don't know, they're not obvious. These things aren't obvious. So I guess that would be another thing. It's like, don't assume the client knows the simplest things.
And I think that's super helpful just for anyone that's coming inside of this or thinking about or considering, right? And in no way, shape, or form is that the expectation of our interpreters. But if it's something that comes naturally to you, we appreciate it. So
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is my personal experience, and I really have been searching this kind of work out. So I'm imagining anybody who's coming on board and finding you guys is also obviously very connected to this work. So anyway, yeah.
And it comes with time. I would also say that as well, right? You learn, you pick up on these nuances as you move through the cases. So that's just really, really inspiring. And your testimony, your journey has been uplifting for myself, and I'm sure it will be for other persons that are looking and tuning into this. So I'm grateful for that. And just, I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, the work that you do, I can only imagine, right? You have an entire business, you have children that you're raising, and then you're doing all these other things. One thing I really always want to check in with interpreters, or just anyone that I come across in my own span, is how are you taking care of yourself, especially when you're moving through these particular situations that can also cause trauma to yourself as well. So, what are some ways that you maybe center self care and mindfulness in your own practices, if you do,
Yeah.
while you're navigating these particular difficult conversations?
Well, it's a really good question, and you used all the right words. So I meditate. I'm a mindfulness practitioner, so I sit every day, and that's how I manage all my stress, not just the stress of, you know, of the volunteer work, but my own personal stress. I am a very big believer in the practice of mindfulness. So I'm a student of Buddhism, and I sit and I study, and to me, that's not to say that you don't, you know, I think you guys all saw me tear up and my blood ran cold and I got goosebumps. I mean, obviously I still feel all these things, but as far as carrying them around as a weight, my meditation practice is what helps me process
I
heavy.
absolutely love that. That brings me so much joy.
Yeah.
Just hearing you
Yeah.
say that. And I thank you so much for just being open and transparent, and like the ways in which that you give care back to yourself after navigating these particular situations and conversations.
Yeah.
I don't know any other better way to close this out. This was an absolutely amazing conversation, Casey. Thank you so much for being our first interpreter conversation series. Woohoo! Yes, we did it.
Number one.
Number one. I'm so grateful for that. And I hope that this conversation resonates with whomever is receiving it on the opposite end. And with that, have a great day. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, Casey.
Bye.